All right, guys. So today we're going to go over equity waterfalls. This one's pretty in-depth topic. So we're really going to high level it, to be honest, and we're going to build on a foundation from there. So we just want to kind of grasp the basics. So what is an equity waterfall? And that is, the equity waterfall is how partners distribute the share of the profit in an investment. These terms are negotiated upfront between the LPs and GPs. These are typically structured to incent the GP to perform on the investment and reward them for higher returns. So, although there are general norms to how this is structured, there are countless variations that can come into play. We'll be talking about the basics today and building from there as needed. So, typically, these are stepped payments that favor those higher in the capital stack as key IRR metrics are hit. And kind of just to backtrack on that second paragraph there, right before my meeting with Dave an hour or so ago, I got on the phone with somebody who completely threw a curveball on equity to me on waterfalls and whatnot. So, I mean, there's so many different ways this stuff gets structured. So this is definitely going to be kind of like the high level general, peanut butter jelly version of it. And then we'll from there expand. So key term we're going to learn today, IRR, and that means internal rate of return. It is used to calculate the annual return of investment. It shows the profitability of an investment over time. This is going to be an important calculation for us to understand and realize, and what it is showing us. And basically, this is the way IRR is calculated. There's a test at the end. Write this down. So it's future value over current value to the power of 1 divided by the number of years or the number of time allotments. Normally it's, if you're trying to calculate it over months, you're using something different there, but annually you're going to do it over years and then -1 on that calculation. And so this, future valuation, if you're trying to project it, or if you're actually at the end of an investment, then you're actually calculating the final IRR. You're not really using a future value. You're using, what the new realized value was. So a little quick scenario. You buy a $2 million property, finance at 65% loan to value. Your initial equity injection is $700,000. You sell the property 3 years later for $2.5 million, and you receive 1.2 in proceeds from the sale. So this is just if you were out on your own, putting your own money into it. We're trying to keep it simple. So the math looks like this. You take the 1.2 million received divided by your initial investment of 700,000. You're now throwing in the time over on it to the power of 1/3, and you end up with 0.1968. So IRR would be 19.68 in that situation. And just kind of to show the relationship of the time in there, exact same thing that we had before, except for 5 years versus 3, we now drop down to an 11% IRR. And then what if this happened quicker? You're now at a 30% IRR if you're able to pull it off in 2 years, almost 31. So that's where the calculation is, time value money. How the time that it's taking is critical. So we're gonna have an example waterfall now. This is kind of just a general example waterfall, somewhat the norm, but again, there's always variations. So don't think that if you're going into equity, this is what you're going to get. So step 1 of the waterfall would be 100% of the cash flows to the LP until the original investment is repaid. So in this waterfall, we just have an LP. We're not going to worry about a pref below them. It's just kind of an LP. So they're lower on the capital stack from the GP, so they are basically getting paid first. They're getting their original investment repaid first. Next step, 100% of the cash flow goes to the LP to get them to an 8% IRR. So again, going to lower on the capital stack, meaning that pref return requirement. Next, finally, in our little scenario here, we're going to have a 10% catch up. That 10% catch up can vary depending on the equity injected. Our scenario, we're just going to have a 10% in equity injection from the 10% of the equity is going to come from our GP. So we're just using a 10% catch up. That, again, negotiable number can change, can be 20 or whatnot. And then basically it's 10% of the distributions in step 2 and 3. So we get to some tricky math there. We'll go over that briefly. But after that, remaining cash flow will be distributed 90% to LP, 10% to GP. Again, we've got a 10% of the equity is coming from the GP. So just in our little example, that's what we're looking at, the GP to get 10%. Again, this could be different if you've got a GP that's coming in with more cash. You could also have further steps from here that, let's say a second IRR of 16% or 20% is met, and then a step 5 where maybe the GP starts to get even more. But for our basic waterfall, we'll just stop here to keep it simple. So this is the deal we'll be working with. This was purchased in 2020 for $25 million. This is what the capital stack looked like. We've got equity up here, debt down here, and then this is what the sale was. So this is kind of the breakdown. The debt in the bottom, LP equity, GP equity. When it sells, all that stuff, even the part that was included in equity, that's proceeds. So that's going back into the pot to be distributed in the waterfall, which in this situation, obviously there's profit on top. If it was a situation where it was sold for, instead of 35 million, if it was sold for 20 million, that's where we got a problem. It's still all going back into the pot to pay that capital stack from the bottom up. So, and step 1 of our waterfall was LP equity is repaid. So step 1 in our example, remember that the waterfall is paid from the bottom up. In this example, the investment did well, and the 7.65 original investment will be returned in full to the LP. So we've got starting out with our 21 million in proceeds. LP gets there's 7.65 back. There's 13.85 remaining, and we're now moving on to the LP preferred return is paid. So step 2, the LP is paid their preferred return, and our example waterfall that was set at 8% IRR, and our investment hold was 3 years from 2020 to 2023. So this is where we get to do some of that math with the IRR. Basically, it works out that to get to 8% IRR, they need to receive the 9.6 back on this. Now, that doesn't mean that they're getting 9.6 on top of their 7. What it means is they're getting after their 7, 9, to bring them up to 9.6. So they're going to get an additional just under 2 million, and that will now go into what they're repaid up here. So we still have remaining equity, which is good. We've now made it to the catch up. So, and this is, at this point, GP hasn't received anything. So as you can see from the math up here, we're at step 3, $0 gained. LP is doing quite well, already gotten their 8% return or pref return on there. So catch-ups can be included to basically, it's going to reward the GP for getting the LP their 8% pref. The GP gets some back without the LP kind of taking anything from the pot. So what this looks like is it's 10% of the distributions of step 2 plus the distributions of this step. This gets a little, it sounds trickier than it is, to be honest. And basically, it gets calculated like this. Step 2 was the 1.9. Basically, we're just going to divide that by 90% to treat it as though it is 20 or 90% of this, of the new full amount, which is going to be the amount for step 2, or step 3 rather, I apologize. So step 3, they are going to get 10% of this 2.2 million. So that's the new math on that, and they're getting 220,000. So they're still quite a ways behind, on this. Their original investment was 850,000. The LP's original investment was 7.6 million. LP is doing quite well. They've at least hit their 8%, pref return for the 3 years. GP's, at this point in the game, not made any money. In fact, lost some, but there's still a step 4. So in this scenario, we're now at a 90-10 split for the remainder of the proceeds. So this is the typical, it's normally done based on the amount of the equity brought to the table at the start. In this scenario, LP brought in 90% of the equity, GP brought in 10% of the equity. And again, as I stated before, depending on, there could be a step 4 or step 5 if there's another IRR metric hit for the LP. In this one, we're just going to call it good here and split it. 10% of the remaining equity goes GP, 90% goes to LP, and at the end of the day, GP still made out pretty good. 1.3 return to them. LP made out quite well here. 20 million return to them. And everybody's got a payday. And when you look at this, it does seem kind of well, GP received quite a lot less than LP, but when you think about it, LP has also risked a lot more too. If this deal went south, GP is only losing 850 million or 850,000, which, yeah, it's funny to say, only 850,000, but it's a lot less than the 7.65 million that went in there already from the LP. So if we look at the math on that, GP still made a pretty good return. Almost 18% IRR, nothing to really scoff at. Limited partner made almost 40% IRR, so did quite well. And that's where, the waterfalls can get tweaked, with something to if, the 20% IRR is hit, then change it from a 90-10 to maybe a 30-70, something like that to reward the GP further. So some takeaways and things to remember. This is a basic example to give you the general idea of a waterfall. So, there's a lot of other components of this. The cash flow of the property over the time, that is also something that would go into the waterfall. So we didn't really discuss that, but basically, if it's something where it's a property that is maybe a value add and has cash flow already, or there's going to be 2 years of stabilized income and then sell, that's going to fall into the waterfall too. It really get treated in the same way that those initial steps are. Obviously, initially bringing down LP's equity out the gate, and then if they are actually able to hit that 7.6 in cash flow, be pretty amazing. But it could go to the next step from there. But at least it takes a dent out of it. Also, in our situation, things like we were really looking at a situation where we had a interest-only payment on the debt too. So there's a lot of moving components to this, but this kind of gives us a general idea. GP's investment size does play a large factor into their return. So, keep in mind our GP came away with a 17% IRR. If they'd put in 20%, they'd probably do a little bit better. Or if we were able to secure a higher debt for them up front, they'd probably do better too, because there's less LP in there versus what they brought in. So other thing is modeling out potential incomes will be important when dealing with equity or potential outcomes. That's something that if we're going down the path of equity with clients, we'll definitely need to be modeling this out as to this is what this could look like in these scenarios. And that's probably another time we need to make sure we've got a calculator on hand. There's spreadsheets out there. Obviously, we can build one ourselves too, or if we don't have one already, to kind of model this stuff, because there's a lot of moving parts, and we want to be able to show our clients potentially this is what could come from this. And then obviously the investment performance is critical to the LP. So if you've got something that you want to take down the path of equity, you don't want to be talking to the GP where he's saying, this is my first rodeo, it sounds like a good idea. The LP is really looking for certainty. In this scenario, they did quite well. It could be a situation where they don't even hit that 8% IRR, and they say, hey, our money was better used elsewhere or better placed in a different investment. Or it could be a situation where their investment is lost, and then it's no fun for anybody. So that's something that's very critical. last thing, the more you understand waterfalls, the more creative you can be with negotiations and the more value you can add to your clients. So another thing, this is really high level, kind of just touching on the surface of it. There's, lots of questions to be asked. If you have any, ask them. If I don't know the answer, I probably won't. I'll find it for you. There's also a lot of content online, for videos or reading on this stuff. So educate yourself. It's always good to kind of go down the rabbit hole with the questions and see what you can learn.